Everyone in Westeros expects Tyrion to be a villain, an ill-made, spiteful creature in Tywin's words. They are wrong, of course. But why? The truth is that what they hate him for is precisely why he isn't one. If he had been born in a body that the world accepted, he would be much more dangerous than he is right now. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This sounds like I'm just saying, if Tyrion weren't a dwarf, his ego would be out of control and he'd turn into a bad person. But that's not really what I mean. Because in the show, and even more clearly in the books, there are moments where the mask slips. Moments where Tyrion lets his guard down and shows us what he actually wants, what he actually values. And those moments give us a pretty clear picture of the man he could have become.
Used to sit all day in the garden, crushing beetles with a rock. Nothing made him happier. Nothing made you happier. You think being tormented from birth would have given you some affinity for the afflicted? On the contrary, laughing at another person's misery was the only thing that made me feel like everyone else.
At first glance, it looks like just a small confession that doesn't mean much, but it does. Tyrion admits that the only time he felt like everyone else was when he was laughing at a brain-damaged child crushing beetles. And if you think about the world he grew up in, it makes sense. His father built his legend by destroying House Rain and having a song written about it. His sister has been eliminating anyone who threatens her since she could walk. Even Littlefinger climbed from nothing by using everyone as a stepping stone. Tyrion came to understand that you rise only by making someone else fall, and for a moment, that someone was Orson. But being a dwarf shaped everything about how the world treated him. His father forces him to watch Tysha's rape. Joffrey humiliates him at his wedding. The entire court laughs at him during the dwarf joust. For that brief moment with Orson, he wasn't the broken one. He was the one doing the breaking. But in reality, he was the broken one himself, and that experience taught him empathy. Not because suffering automatically makes you good, but because he finally understood what he was inflicting on others. Being a dwarf added that enlightenment. But without it, that impulse to make others feel small doesn't disappear. It just never gets challenged. He'd never learn the lesson. He'd never develop the restraint. And we see glimpses of this darker Tyrion more often than you'd think, like the time he manipulates Lancel.
Tell me, did Cersei have you knighted before or after she took you into her bed? What? Nothing to say? No more warnings for me, sir?
You will withdraw these filthy accusations.
Have you ever given any thought to what King Joffrey will have to say when he finds out you've been bedding his mother?
He discovers Lancel is sleeping with Cersei, and instead of being disgusted, instead of confronting them, he sees an opportunity. He blackmails Lancel, threatens to tell Joffrey, and turns his own cousin into a spy against his sister. In the books, we get to see Tyrion's thoughts right after he's done this, and he's not regretful. He's lying in Shay's bed, thinking about everything he controls. The wars, the intrigues, the great bloody game. He thinks about how everyone has always seen him. The dwarf, the monster, the one they scorned and laughed at. But now he holds all the power. He's not just using power to survive. He loves it. He's intoxicated by it. That control over Lancel is what makes him feel complete. And here's what really reveals him. Shay asks him to leave King's Landing with her, to abandon the game, to live a simple life together, to finally have the love he's been desperate for his entire life. And he says no. He chooses to stay. And then he tells her why.
I can't. I do belong here. These bad people. What I'm good at. Out talking them, out thinking them. It's what I am. And I like it. I like it more than anything I've ever done.
Think about who he's saying this to. The woman he's trying to protect, the woman he cares about. And he's confessing that manipulating people, dominating them intellectually, brings him more joy than anything else. More than love, more than being loved. But here's the thing. He still has that need for love, that desire for acceptance, desperate search for someone to see him, to value him. And that need creates hesitation. It makes him try to send Shay away to protect her. It makes him want people to think well of him. It slows him down. Now imagine that need doesn't exist. Imagine Tyrion without the desperate search for love or acceptance. What's left? Just the pure enjoyment of power and manipulation. No hesitation. No one to protect. No need to be seen as good. Just someone who wants to be in charge, to be powerful with nothing holding him back. The scary reality is that this makes him dangerously close to Tywin. and even his own family sees it. In the books, Tyrion's Aunt Jenna tells Jaime something that Tywin himself refused to accept. Tyrion is Tywin's son. She said this to Tywin's face once, and he didn't speak to her for half a year, because she was right. Tyrion has everything Tywin had: the ruthlessness, the strategic mind, the ability to see 10 moves ahead. Even Varys sees it. He watches Tyrion play the game in King's Landing and recognizes he's looking at Tywin's true heir. Not Jaime, who's honorable and straightforward. Not Cersei, who's emotional and reckless. Tyrion, the one with his father's mind. But here's what made all the difference. His dwarfism kept him in his place. Tywin never let him rise, never gave him real power, never treated him as the heir he should have been. And that limitation, that constant suppression, it's part of what shaped him. He had the hunger, the skill, the ruthlessness, but he was always held back. And there's something even darker here. Tywin, for all his cruelty, at least believed he was doing it for the family. At least that's what he told himself. But Tyrion? Tyrion knows the truth. He's not justifying it with family or duty. He just loves the power. So, imagine this. What if his father hadn't kept him in his place? What if Tywin had seen him as the true heir, groomed him, elevated him? What if Tyrion Lannister had been given everything he wanted from the beginning? What would have been is actually given to us in the evidence we just saw. Everything we covered showed us what kind of man Tyrion is in his heart. Someone who loves power, who enjoys domination, who climbs by pushing others down. The only thing that makes him empathetic, and the character we love, is the experience of being a dwarf. Change that one thing and you get someone very different, someone cruel, someone unlikable. Because look at what happens in Westeros when privilege meets cruelty without empathy. You get Joffrey, a boy born into power who never learned what powerlessness feels like, so he tortures people for fun. But Joffrey is impulsive, stupid, easy to manipulate. Now imagine that same lack of empathy, that same enjoyment of cruelty, but with Tyrion's mind, with Tywin's strategic brilliance, with the ability to plan 10 moves ahead. That's what alternate Tyrion becomes, all of Joffrey's cruelty, with none of his weaknesses. This Tyrion never learns what it feels like to be Orson. He just keeps climbing by making others feel small. The love of power we saw after Lancel is still there, but without guilt, without the desperate search for love slowing him down. Just pure enjoyment of control. He'd be Tywin's true son, maybe worse, because Tywin convinced himself it was for the family. This version would know he just loves the power itself. So, what does that look like in practice? He's still Tywin's son, still second to Jaime the Golden Heir, but now, instead of being humiliated and dismissed, he's taken seriously. And that makes him hungry, not desperate, but entitled. He believes he deserves power, and he's smart enough to take it. He'd still go to King's Landing, still become Hand when the opportunity came. And he'd be good at it, maybe even better than our Tyrion, because there's no hesitation, no moments where empathy makes him pause. When he discovers Lancel is sleeping with Cersei, he doesn't just blackmail him, he breaks him. Not satisfied with leverage for control, he pushes further, enjoys the cruelty itself, not for strategic gain, just because he can. The small council fears him. Varys would recognize what he's looking at and be terrified. Even Littlefinger would be careful, because this Tyrion doesn't care about being liked or building alliances through goodwill. He builds them through leverage, through knowing everyone's secrets, and making sure they know he knows. He wouldn't protect Sansa. Why would he? She's just another piece on the board. Bran? A cripple who means nothing to him. Jon Snow, some bastard at the wall who's none of his concern. All those moments where our Tyrion showed kindness to broken things, they don't happen, because he's never been broken himself. And Joffrey? Joffrey wouldn't dare humiliate him. This isn't someone you mock at your wedding. This is Tywin's sinister son, the one who holds all the power and isn't afraid to use it. People fear him. The trial never happens because he's never in a position where someone like Cersei could frame him and make it stick. He's too dangerous, too ruthless, too protected by the fear he creates. He'd be functional, successful, powerful, and completely hollow. The man we love would never exist. But that's not what happened, because Tyrion was born a dwarf, and that changed everything. That kid who laughed at Orson crushing beetles became Orson. The world made him the target, forced him to experience what he'd inflicted. He went from the one laughing to the one being laughed at, mocked, humiliated, treated as less than human his entire life. And that experience, that brutal lesson of being on the receiving end, it gave him something no other Lannister has: empathy. He sees Jon Snow at the Winterfell, a bastard no one wants, and he doesn't dismiss him. He gives him advice, treats him with dignity, because he knows what it's like to be seen as lesser. He meets Bran, a crippled boy who'll never walk again, and instead of pity or indifference, he designs him a saddle. He gives him possibility. When Sansa is trapped in King's Landing, terrified and alone, he protects her. Not because it benefits him, it actually puts him at risk with Joffrey, but because he understands what it means to be powerless and afraid. Cripples, bastards, and broken things, that's what he calls them. That's who he sees, that's who he helps, because he's one of them. And Varys sees this in him. In the show, he tells Tyrion, "You have your father's instincts for politics, and you have compassion. Not just intelligence, compassion." That's the fundamental difference. The suffering, the rejection, the humiliation. It forced him to see the world through other people's eyes. Because he had to. Because survival meant understanding what it felt like to be treated the way he treated others. Without that, he'd just be another Lannister, smart, ruthless, successful, but not Tyrion, not the man we love.
I wish I was the monster you think I am.
When Tyrion says this, everyone in that throne room thinks they understand. They've seen the monster their whole lives, the twisted body, the unnatural proportions. To them, this is just confirmation, the imp finally showing his true nature. But we know better now. We've seen what's actually in Tyrion's heart, the love of power, the enjoyment of manipulation, the impulse to dominate, all of it's there. The ingredients for a monster were always present. The only thing that stopped him from becoming one is the very thing they hate him for. Being a dwarf forced him to learn empathy, forced him to understand powerlessness, forced him to see that the people he manipulates are human beings who suffer, because he suffered too. The people of King's Landing spent Tyrion's entire life looking at him and seeing something twisted. They were right that something dangerous was there. They just never understood that the thing they hated was the only thing keeping that danger in check. The dwarf made the man. And without it, the man we love would never have existed. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Your likes and comments are a big motivation. See you next time.